Okay, reports 5.1, we have the value analysis mapping tool presented by Sustainability Planner, Ms. Lukyanova. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for taking the time to receive my presentation today. Let me share my screen with you. One moment, please. In preparation for the official community plan review process that staff are gearing up for, we have been researching current best practices and cutting-edge tools that other communities use to ensure environmentally and financially sustainable land use decisions. And value mapping is one of those tools that has come up for us through that research, so we're excited to share it with you today. And first of all, why value mapping? Well, as you know, most communities are struggling to maintain existing infrastructure and face infrastructure debt. And that problem is receiving more attention today, as a lot of the infrastructure that was put in the 50s and 60s is coming to the end of its useful life and is requiring costly replacements. So it's particularly relevant today. So where value mapping comes in is it actually links our asset management with our land use planning. So how does that do that? Well, when we talk about asset management, we look at all the hard infrastructure that we have, like our roads and our pipes and our treatment facilities, and what are the true costs of maintaining that infrastructure over the long run, including its eventual renewal and replacement. And what value mapping does is it looks at the land use and how much revenue different land use patterns generate, and whether that revenue is enough to sustain that infrastructure that's required to serve the land use. So it really addresses that fundamental reason for that infrastructure debt. And it's certainly not a quick fix, but it's an important lens to apply as we think about our land use patterns. So another analogy that's helpful to think about is an analogy to farmland, right? So as a community, we can think about the land that's available to us as farmland, and as a farmer makes decisions about what kind of crops to plant. The same as a community, we make decisions around land use patterns. And the types of crops the farmer chooses will determine whether the farm is financially sustainable, and that's similar to a community and land use. So that's one way to look at it. Another one is to look at the amount of public infrastructure we have relative to the private wealth that is in our community, and that's the private developments that are then taxed to collect enough revenue to maintain infrastructure. So in this extreme example, if you can imagine a very long road, say it's tens of kilometers long, there is water and sewer and storm infrastructure underneath it, and street lighting and sidewalks, and we have one single family house in the end of this road. So in this case, we have very little private investment, just one home, and we have a lot of public infrastructure investment. So our private to public ratio is very low, and chances are there's not going to be enough revenue from that one house to maintain that infrastructure in the long run, and to repair and then to upgrade those pipes as time comes. On the other hand, if we imagine the same street with a lot more development along different housing types, businesses, etc., now we have a lot more private wealth for the same public investment. And we have a much better chance of that revenue that's collected from that private wealth being sufficient to sustainably maintain the public infrastructure. So from the research that we've done as staff, they talk about that ratio being as much as 40 times private wealth for the public infrastructure that we have to ensure that long-term financial sustainability. So this is where we come into this metric of financial productivity. So the analysis that we've done is we look at all the parcels in our community and the revenue that they're generating for the community in terms of property taxes, and then we divide that by the acres of land. And that's really critical here, because the size of the parcel, of course, determines how much hard infrastructure is going to require to service it, right? A large parcel means longer road, longer pipes, etc. So that's why it's looked at as revenue per acre. So different land uses will have different taxes per acre or financial productivity, and that has direct impacts on how financially sustainable they are in terms of being able to pay for the infrastructure that's required to service them. And so that directly impacts the infrastructure debt that community will face. So with that, I'm going to switch to my screen and show you the actual value mapping tool that staff have developed in-house. There you go. So this is the value mapping tool. It's a web-based interactive dashboard. And what we've done is we've looked at all the parcels in the community and looked at the taxes that they generate for the community and then divided by acres. So we have taxes per acre for each parcel, and you'll see they're all color-coded. So we start with very low taxes per acre in the gray colors. So dark gray, that's typically undeveloped land, and then we move up from there to lighter greens, so $5,000 to $10,000. That's pretty common for single-family use, single-family homes land use. And the darker green, then we go to yellow at $20,000, $30,000 per acre. Those are yellow and red, orange colors, and then we go to deeper red as we're seeing higher financial productivity. So those would be commercial uses as well as high-density residential would fall under that as well. So I will just scroll down to the south end just to give you a sense of the tool. So you'll see there's a lot of light green. So that's that revenue bracket of $5,000 to $10,000. That's quite typical for single-family home land use. And then we'll see some pockets of higher financial productivity, like this orange parcel here. This is our Pacific Point market at $42,000 per acre, compared to, say, this single-family home parcel here at $9,000 per acre. And as we move up, you'll see some spots of higher taxes per acre, like the condo buildings. So high residential density typically means higher financial productivity. So if I zoom into this condo building parcel, you'll see it's $34,000 per acre, and a total of $16,000 in taxes. And I should highlight that this is just the city mill rate. So we're not looking at the other mill rates for regional or school. It's just the city mill rate without the fees. So this parcel generates $16,000, and if I select all these residential parcels together, they generate about 16 as well. So you can see how this is much higher in terms of revenue per acre. And I have to say that this type of analysis is certainly not to say that single-family homes are a bad thing. It's just that we, as a community, it's important for us to understand the different land uses that we have and how they compare to each other, and what role they play in our long-term financial health. So I'll scroll up and show you a few more parcels here. So you'll see some of the recent developments where we increased density. For example, these row homes on Westview and Joyce are now $24,000 per acre compared to the single-family home at $7,000. And then you'll see some of the older condo buildings up here at $36,000, $30,000, also in orange. And our commercial core, you'll see there are a lot of gray, so those could undeveloped parcels or parcels with very little development on them. And again, that points to opportunity for where we may want to see some infill development. And the larger commercial parcels with the big box store area, I'll just hover over a few of them to show you what that looks like. So this parcel here, $35,000 per acre. This one is 16, so this is a bit surprising that it's not coming up in yellow or orange. And certainly one insight we saw from this tool is that surface parking is a big contributor to that, right? So when we have a lot of surface parking on a parcel, even though there may be a lot of commercial uses, but that parking takes up so much land, so that overall your revenue per acre is not perhaps as high as you might expect for this commercial area. And then if we look at our marine downtown core, this is where we see some of our highest yielding parcels. And that's because the land is just utilized very efficiently in that traditional development pattern, right? So we have a building that takes up most of the lot. There's not as much surface parking here, so you'll see some parcels that as high as $170,000 per acre. This one is 40. This one is 85,000, 100,000 here. So those are the kind of insights that we can get from this tool, and it certainly supports a lot of the direction we have in our official community plan in terms of using existing infrastructure and supporting infill development, and it really highlights the areas where that's possible that we could be focusing on and can really support us in the official community plan process. So we're certainly not the first community to do that type of analysis. There's quite a few cities and towns in the States and increasingly in Canada that have looked at value per acre. And then the next step is not just look at revenue, but actually look at the costs as well and look at some of that hard infrastructure like roads and the water, sewer, storm pipes that are required to maintain it. And so these communities have done, and the most recent is City of Kelowna in BC, is they took the revenue per acre but then subtracted the costs of servicing. And here the colors are reversed from our map. So the green is actually where they found the parcels to be revenue positive, so they produce more revenue for the community than the cost to service, and the red is revenue negative, so they actually cost more to service than the revenue that they generate. And a lot of it is, it's really a similar pattern with the cities that have done that analysis, and that is that core of a community where there's a little more housing density, there's some commercial uses that typically ends up being revenue positive. And the more suburban sprawl development pattern, that's where it's revenue negative. And so again, it's not to demonize one type of development over the other, but it's certainly an important lens when we think about the long-term financial sustainability. So this is a slide from the City of Kelowna presentation, and you'll see hillside and suburban developments being subsidized, and then urban core, urban center, and downtown is where it's revenue positive. So again, it's not that these types of land uses shouldn't exist, it's that these are required in order for these to be financially sustainable and to balance the whole picture out. And while we haven't done the costing piece, we just looked at the revenue, we're certainly seeing the same pattern as what Kelowna has seen in other communities when they do that type of analysis. So if we look at our typical low density, roughly 0.2 acre lot, land use, we're looking at about $9,000 per acre. And if we look at medium density, so this is a 2-story condo building, it's about $30,000. And this higher density building with underground parking as high as $56,000. So we're already seeing sort of similar pattern. And we haven't done sort of a thorough analysis of the costs, but we have done some back of the napkin calculations for that hard infrastructure costs. And so if we look at how, where we currently spend money as a municipality, we have about 5% going towards roads, streets, and sidewalks. And that includes operation and maintenance, street lights, sweeping, etc. So even if we take that entire piece of revenue and say all of it goes to repaving, for a single family home, it would take 100 years for that money to pave the asphalt. So even though we're not looking at the complete picture with all our pipes, but it's certainly painting a similar picture to what Kelowna and other communities have seen. And if we look at the higher residential density like this building, it looks a lot more reasonable, I guess, in terms of the years that would be required for this taxes for this building to pay for street repaving. So some of kind of future direction for this tool, we think it would be interesting to do what other cities have done and look at those hard infrastructure costs and map them out, like Kelowna, for the roads and the 3 pipes, so water, sewer, and storm. And also looking at servicing capacity, right? So we know infill development helps us be more financially sustainable, but where are those opportunities for more infill? So where do we have existing infrastructure in place already that can support that infill development and that higher financial productivity? And we think that this tool will be really helpful as we go into the OCP process to just add that additional lens as we think about land use. And with this, I will stop and we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow, that is so slick. That is incredible. Your worship, you were first on the list.
Thank you, Anna.
You need your mic, sir.
Thank you, Anna. This is very interesting. I think one of the last things you said was this is an additional lens, because basically, from my point of view, we've been doing this all along for as long as I can remember, infilling, creating smaller lots, allowing less parking, more biking, more walking, trying to convince people to develop closer to the amenities. And, you know, I just read this, the Integrated Community Sustainable Plan, ISCP. Relevant goals include building walkable neighborhoods located close to commercial amenities, encouraging multifamily housing, promoting infill development rather than rural sprawl, and ensuring a diversification of housing type and better accommodation to individuals' family needs through all stages of life. I think we've been doing an excellent job in the city at all of these things. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're creating here is basically a tool that just helps continue exactly what it is we're already doing, or am I missing something?
Go ahead.
Mayor, yes, we, and perhaps our Director of Planning, Mr. Gao, could chime in on that as well, but it's certainly something we've seen, and I know that our planners support. It's the infill and increased density in our core neighborhoods. And yes, you're right that this is a tool that will help us see potential for more of that, but also really inform the OCP process and how we look at those land use designations moving forward to support this.
Go ahead.
Also, we need to be aware that, and I think people, need to change with the times, but as we've created some of the smaller lots and a lot of these innovative things that have been brought in by planning over the last 14 years that I've been here, it's also brought, a fair amount of criticism where people are saying, hey, this is Powell River, we like our big lots, we like room for our children to play. In Vancouver, you have a 30-foot lot. That's why we moved to Powell River. So you've also got that mindset. But again, and when some of these projects come here and they get that pushback, folks at this table speak up and say, well, hold it. This is about infill. This is about using our assets to the fullest of their need because of the high cost of maintaining them. So I believe that this is just another tool to help us continue on what it is I think this city has done an excellent job of doing and in defending, as it's been maybe attacked by some folks that, believe that we shouldn't be having smaller lots in Powell River and we should be leaving it alone in that regard. So am I missing that? Is there something else here? I hear you're saying it'll provide help for OCP because it can show you which areas are maybe best to develop because of the infrastructures. So I just want to make sure I'm not missing something here, that there's something else here that might even make it worse for our taxpayers, because taxes are already a bit of a struggle, but they are for every community, not just Powell River. Thanks.
Director Gao, did you have anything to add to that? I think we're on the right track. This is going to help us.
That's through the chair. Thanks. Yeah, really, this is just one more tool that's going to help facilitate those conversations tied to financial resiliency. I think Ms. Lukyanova identified exactly what we're trying to get at here, and it's another tool to make sure that we're having that same conversation. I think some of the work that planning has done has been right along the lines of supporting what we're learning here, but it is, and being in the position that I am, I do see and hear from the community those that do have challenges with the current taxes for single-family residential. This is hopefully a tool that will help council be able to speak to those members and say, well, in fact, single-family residential is subsidized by higher density land uses in other parts of our community, as opposed to looking for ways to continually reduce our services, but in fact understand that it is costing the city a lot more money to maintain these single-family residential in perpetuity. The other piece that is worth noting is that a lot of our community was built out through the 50s and 60s, and it's this era of infrastructure that is coming to the end of its life expectancy. And so the decisions that we make going through the next OCP process are extremely important in terms of how we look at land use. And so that's just one more piece that this is going to add to the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I see it as an incredible tool for being able to use it to educate the public on exactly, the best use of land going forward. I've got Councillor Elliott and then Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anna Lukyanova. I'm thinking this is an amazing visual tool that will help us provide analysis on a number of fronts in a very easy way that used to be a little bit complex. So even plans for annexation, for example, would be analyzed through this tool fairly quickly as to whether they're helpful to the city or not. One of the points I wanted to make around the high density areas is they come at a cost for a need of more acres of park. And so there should be a way in the tool to balance the need for the additional gray park areas that are non-contributing as a balance to the higher density, and it should be factored in such a way that we're not missing that point, because I think it's missed a little bit here, and it would help us provide more balance to our decision making in that regard. I just love it. I think we're going to be able to really clearly demonstrate the cost of different types of zonings and sizes of zonings and what those cost people, and perhaps somewhere down the road we'll have an actual point of where we are positive versus subsidized along that line, so we can clearly map that out too, and people understand that point of view. It may lead to positive changes in how we structure taxes in the future at some point, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palm?
Thank you very much. This is a nice segue into what I have to say in regards to what's on my mind about densification. As we continue down this road to densify, I have to speak to an item that came up a couple of weeks ago when we were faced with the possible loss of a field, JP Dallas, for our community garden, and that really caught me by surprise when we was told by staff that we're thinking about decommissioning. As we continue to densify, those parks become a greater asset to our city and our citizens. To lose that field would be not a good thing on a go-forward basis. I'm already being approached by parents that have kids in the JB Dallas school saying our kids play on that field. How dare you try to take it away? So I just wanted to make that statement. And the other thing that I would like to encourage staff to do to think about a community garden and hopefully resolve that issue with the Rotary Club is that with the clearing up at the airport now at the end of Field Street where we have water and whatnot, that would be an excellent idea to look for that community garden space, which would be just hollow ground or fallow ground or whatever you want to refer to it as. Would give you enough area to put in 100 gardens or whatever they wanted to do. So I encourage staff to look in that direction instead of a loss of a field, which we know Cranberry will be decommissioned in the future, and that one will definitely be going down. So I just had to make that statement. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Sutcliffe.
Thank you. Really appreciate this report. Sometime in the past, when I was not so distant past, when I was doing some studying about urban planning, I came across a a three-dimensional depiction, which was the same kind of tool that you have put together, Ms. Lukyanova. And I think this was done by either Houston or Austin, Texas, but it had, it was kind of more like a bar graph over a three-dimensional picture, which I think you had in one of your graphics here. Only this one showed, I don't know what the baseline was, but there was also bars that went down, vertically down from a baseline, showing that those particular areas were cost negative or revenue negative. And then, of course, the core of the city was revenue positive by a major amount. Clearly, I really like the colors with this tool that you're developing, but I'm wondering if there's any chance, and I think your last slide suggests, and it's obvious, it's going to have to be part of this tool in terms of cost, but I'm curious in my mind how over time, is time factored in somehow or other, like to considering asset management and expected lifespans of infrastructure? Was that going to be part of the functionality of this tool? And will we have perhaps more of is there any chance we'll have a graphic like that one that I saw from Texas, where there's it's easy to see how the revenue to cost for infrastructure maintenance and the maintenance of the city is depicted? Thank you.
Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Southcott. The visual you're speaking about is, we use color to represent the numbers, right? I think some cities, they use sort of the up or down, right? They have a 3D visual, which is also helpful and is something that we can look at producing. I know that Kelowna updates their tool every year because, for example, right now this map is based on 2021 assessment values and mill rate. So in a year, we would want to update it with a new rate, and in terms of costs as well. I mean, typically those costs don't change as much because the idea is to really look at the true cost over, say, a 100-year lifespan and then annualize it, right? So what is that cost per year that includes the eventual upgrade? Yeah, that would be the idea, is to keep it up to date. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. So by unanimous consent, direct staff to continue development of the value mapping tool. Great. Thank you so much. That is just brilliant. I'm so excited.